one of these incidences is what we need is more stop and frisk. Now, if you do more stop and frisk, what you do is you widen the gulf and the gap between what's dangerous for the community and it's dangerous for law enforcement. But if you build bridges, you're stronger together. How about abroad? Donald Trump thinks you build up a wall and then you just tear up alliances. Like, who needs NATO anymore? And you can diss Mexico and other nations. I'll tell you, the only way to be safe in this world today, I have a boy who's an infantry commander in the Marine Corps. He's deployed overseas for the second time. Right now. He's overseas right now. And I know strong military, you gotta have it. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. But if you don't have strong diplomacy, strong alliances, it's like you're fighting with one hand. How do you defeat terrorism in a world like this? Well, on the battlefield in Iraq and Syria, our military, working with others, doing a good job of shrinking down, just using ISIS as shrinking down their space. But then they decide, well, maybe we can inspire an attack here or there. The only way you stop that is sharing intelligence with allies. Here's somebody that's traveling you got to pay attention to. But if you tear up alliances like Donald Trump wants to get rid of NATO, who are you sharing intelligence with? And who's going to share intelligence with you? The Donald Trump tear up alliances strategy is going to make us weaker, not stronger. But the Hillary Clinton Secretary of State pro-diplomacy, pro-alliance is going to make us stronger. We're stronger together. And then the last pillar of the campaign, the third pillar, is just a pillar. This should be so simple. Anybody who went to kindergarten knows this. We are better off if we respect one another. I mean, let's have a community of respect where everybody can be around the table. Where everybody can be around the table. This is what Hillary Clinton believes. She's worked for it her whole life. This is what I believe. I was a civil rights lawyer for 17 years fighting for equal treatment in the housing industry for people who have been discriminated against either because of the color of their skin or because they or a family member had a disability. Let's just treat everybody as equal. Let's celebrate the beautiful diversity of God's creation. And that's what the third pillar of our campaign is. And we're up against a guy who thinks it's okay to make fun of people with disabilities. Who thinks it's okay to ridicule people if their parents are Mexican American. Ridicule or even suggest people should be treated as second class if they choose to worship as Muslims in a nation that prides herself on religious liberty. Even saying offensive things about women that I don't even like to repeat that he thinks is fine. I want a community of respect. I don't want a community of division. And I got a feeling that is something that all did too. I had a wonderful experience. We were in Miami last night and flew to Lakeland and landed here. And often people will be there at the airport to greet me. There's a really wonderful young guy from Lakeland named Mike Phillips. I don't know if any of you know Mike. He's quite an interesting young guy. He has a severe disability. But he said, look, that ain't limiting me. That's not limiting me. And he's become an expert in working with Apple and other companies to develop assistive technologies, the technologies that will help people in their home, in their school, in their workplace. And he has developed amazing technologies, and he and his mom came out to meet with me. And on this subject, he gave me something, and I didn't tell him I was going to do this, but I was reading it as I was driving over. I just thought I would read it to you, because it's about a community of respect, about who we want to be. It's from Mike Phillips. Senator Kaine, it's an honor to meet you. You're a part of a very unique campaign, the sort that I always hope to see. You and Secretary Clinton are running a presidential campaign that consistently talks about people with disabilities. You have actual disability policy written. I've been waiting my entire voting life for candidates like you and Secretary Clinton, candidates who know about and care about disability issues. I really believe that the federal government is America's heart. It steps in to right America's wrongs, slavery's in, desegregation, women's rights, LGBT rights, all instances of the federal government stepping in and doing what was right. Now I hope that you and Secretary Clinton will push disability rights for it. I hope you'll help to end the false perception that we're broken, that we're less than. I never wanted to not be disabled. I wouldn't be me otherwise. I simply want the tools to, as a fine Methodist lady once put it, live up to my God-given potential. That's all anybody wants, really. Some just need help accessing those tools. I'm fighting for you and Secretary Clinton this election cycle because I know you're fighting for us, all Americans, including Americans with disabilities. Man, that gives me some energy. That's what the campaign is about. We're stronger together. We're stronger together. Donald Trump has a very different vision. And I showed you the book that we wrote, that Hillary wrote about this campaign. Donald Trump wrote a book too, when he kicked off his campaign, to tell about his vision. And this is a little bit offensive, but this is the book that he's selling. And I hate to give him a royalty, but this is energizing to me. This is his book, Crippled America. This is the book that Donald Trump wrote when he decided, I want to tell the American public why I am running for president. And no, I didn't choose that picture of him. He chose that picture to put on his own book. He's sitting in a penthouse up in a tall tower, and he's looking down on a country, and he's dissatisfied with what he sees. Well, I'll tell you something. I don't recognize that as I travel around this country. That's not my view of America. That's not Hillary's view of America. That's not your view of America. We are upbeat, positive, can-do, optimistic, enthusiastic, patriotic people. We're problem solvers. Now, do we have problems to solve? Sure we do. In every zip code. Are there challenges in the world? Sure there are. All over the world. But we can solve any problem we have if we just let everybody around the table to participate in solving it. And the only time we ever run into problems, solving our problems, is when we're pushing people away or dividing folks against one another. Then suddenly we find that we can't do what we need to do. So that, to me, in some ways, we could talk about a million issues, but this, to me, just kind of says it all. There is a vision for this country. There's a direction for this country. There's a path for this country. And I think it's that we're stronger together. Stronger together. We are stronger together. Juntos podemos, somos más fuertes. We are stronger together. A couple of quick issues that I just want to talk about. We know one of the issues that creates anxiety all over this country is the economy. Because I talked about earlier, it's growing again, thank goodness, but some people don't see the ladder that they can climb, or that their kids can climb, to be economically successful. I was a mayor and governor. I worked on economic development stuff all the time, trying to grow jobs in my city and in my state. I know a little bit about this, but I was also a civil rights lawyer who cares deeply about equity, that the opportunities shouldn't just be for some, but they should be for everybody. Hillary and I have a plan. We have two big pieces of legislation in the first 100 days. And the first one is this, the biggest investment in jobs since World War II. We're going to make a huge investment in jobs. Infrastructure. Here in Florida, you have water quality issues in a whole lot of your communities. And that's not unique to you. Flint, Michigan, Philadelphia, all over the country, we have infrastructure that was built 50, 70, 80 years ago that needs to be updated. And the great thing about it is, if you update infrastructure, you hire people right away. And if you're updating your infrastructure right here, these are not jobs that are going to be outsourced. You're hiring people right here, right away to do good jobs. And then, when you invest in infrastructure, clean water, road, rail, ports, airports, broadband, a smart electricity grid, you also raise your platform for economic success. Make it easier for businesses to start in small communities if they have good broadband access. So you hire people today, but then you also get a win down the road. I know mayors are the biggest promoter of infrastructure of anybody in the country, and not just Democratic mayors either. Democrats and Republicans get it. The Chamber of Commerce and organized labor get it. We got a lot of good organized labor here today. So we're going to do that, infrastructure. That's going to be the first component of our jobs plan, and the second plan is going to be education. We got some educators here, I guess, okay? And that means high-quality early childhood education, pre-K, which is such a good investment, celebrating great teachers in K-12, and rebuilding old and crumbling schools, and then making a big, bold commitment on higher ed, that you shouldn't have to mortgage your future to have a future. People should be able to go to college debt-free in this country. Other countries can do it, and we can't too. We focus in our economic plan in the first 100 days on small businesses. I met a number of small business owners as I was taking a few photos, because 2/3 of the new jobs in this country are small business jobs. My dad ran a welding and ironworking shop with 5 employees in Bad Year and 10 in Good Year. Classic American small business. But my brothers sent me through college, and my dad's business judgment put his workers' kids through school. So small business is a real focus for Hillary and me because we both grew up in a small business family. So this is an economic plan. And then fairness, making sure that the minimum wage is increased so you don't work full-time and then be under the poverty level. We shouldn't do that in this country, but if you work full-time for minimum wage, 65% of people who are women and you have a dependent, you're going to be below the poverty level. So minimum wage, equal pay for equal work. These are basic fairness concepts that will be part of that opening 100-day investment. We're very, very excited about it. And I'll say this, the cool thing about the plan we have on the table is that Donald Trump actually does have an economic plan on the table too. And the company that's analyzed it, that's nonpartisan, Moody's Analytics. In fact, the chief economist at Moody's was John McCain's chief economist when he ran for president in 2008. They analyzed the Hillary Clinton economy plan, the Donald Trump economy plan, and they said if the Clinton plan is enacted, at the end of her first term, we will have 10.5 million more jobs. And if the Donald Trump plan is enacted at the end of his first term, we will have lost 3.5 million jobs and be in a lengthy recession. The difference between the Clinton plan and the Trump plan, 14 million jobs. That's why I say Hillary Clinton will be a your hired president and Donald Trump will be a your fired president. The second major piece of legislation that we've talked about doing in the first 100 days is immigration reform. And this is a huge difference between the two campaigns. Hillary and I believe in a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform. The last one was done in 1986 when President Reagan was president. And it was comprehensive. And 30 years later, it's time to update it with a lot of things. With protection for dreamers. With a path for hardworking individuals who are paying taxes, following the laws, getting criminal background record checks to find the path to citizenship. Assisting employers so they can find out the bona fides of employees. More border security. Not separating families, but just focusing our enforcement efforts on those who are creating public safety risks. That's our plan for immigration reform. It got a bipartisan vote in the Senate. Not the exact plan, but the basic concepts did in June of 2013. So we know this is not just something that Democrats are for. Republicans, voters are for it too. But Donald Trump is pitching a very different view. He wants to be deportation nation. He wants to basically deport 16 million people, 11 million people who are here without documents, but then an additional 5 million U.S. citizens who have citizenship but were born to parents who don't. He wants to try to change the law and say now they are no longer citizens. If you're born in the United States, you have been a citizen since the end of the Civil War. We fought the Civil War because the Dred Scott decision said an African-American person, free or slave, born here or not, could never be a citizen, nor could their kids or grandkids ever be a citizen. And so that led to the Civil War and then the rewriting of the Constitution so that the people who are born here are citizens. Donald Trump and Mike Pence both want to get rid of birthright citizenship in this country. We can never let that happen. We can never let that happen. We can never go backward. That's why it was one of the reasons it was so painful. When for 5 years, Donald Trump was promoting the notion that President Obama wasn't a citizen. When all the evidence said, of course he's a citizen. Either he didn't know how painful that was, because it was reminding people that there was a day if you had African descent, you could not be a United States citizen. He was basically taking us back to the darkest time in our history when he kept saying that over and over dozens of times that the president is not a citizen. Why would you want to take us back to those days? Either he knew that it was painful to the people when he said it, or he didn't know our history and he didn't care that it was going to be painful to the people when he said it. And in either event, that person is not qualified. Not qualified to be the President of the United States. Not qualified. Last issue I'll talk about the debate and how we win is national security. I told you I care really deeply about this because Virginia, like Florida, very military state. I mean, I just see an awful lot of vets here, probably an awful lot of you. Raise your hand if you're a vet or a military family, right? So we've got a lot of people here, a lot of people here. And so this is something we care about, but we got to get it right. Hillary Clinton was an Armed Services Committee member in the Senate. She understands the importance of the military and supporting military families. She was also Secretary of State, understands the importance of diplomacy. You can't have one and not the other. You know, the seal of the presidency of the United States has an eagle with the olive branches of diplomacy and peace and the arrows of war. And the eagle is looking toward the olive branches. So we would always prefer diplomacy and peace first. Truman actually changed the eagle's face when he was president to make sure that the American preference would always be diplomacy and peace. But we have to have a strong military because it's a dangerous world. We have to protect ourselves. As an Armed Services Committee member and a Secretary of State, Hillary gets that. She gets the balance. Donald Trump repeatedly has said the American military is a disaster. You do not know how mad that makes me. Because 2 million young men and women volunteer to serve in a time of war, risking their lives, risking their friends' lives, and they do it out of a patriotic desire to serve their country. And they're going to have a guy who's running for Commander-in-Chief calling the military a disaster. A guy who made fun of John McCain, he's no hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured. Who would even think of that? Much less let that come out of their mouth and want to be Commander-in-Chief at the same time. You got to be kidding me. And then you saw how Donald Trump, kind of went after this Virginia family, the Kaine family that spoke at the convention and challenged Donald Trump for some of his anti-Muslim positions. And they stood there and they said, hey, look, we're a Gold Star family. We're a proud Muslim American family. Our son volunteered to fight terrorism, and he lost his life trying to save the lives of other people in his unit. Don't you tell us that Muslim Americans can't be patriotic people. Don't you tell us about sacrifice. And instead of doing what any smart person would have done, he should have said, I'm sorry. No, he doubled down and he attacked the family. How come the wife wasn't allowed to talk? And then she had to come back and say, because I can't take a microphone and talk about my son. I'm still too emotional about it 10 years later. I mean, what kind of person does this who wants to be Commander-in-Chief?
He hasn't read the Constitution.
In terms of protecting our nation and keeping us safe, I mean, I'll tell you this. I trust Hillary with my son's life. I know her. If she has to grapple with the hard national security, she's a good listener. She's going to get good people around her. She's going to cross-examine them. She's going to weigh the diplomacy and the use of military force. And she's then human like the rest of us, but she's going to do everything she can to make that decision the right way. Donald Trump was out praising Vladimir Putin as a great example of leadership in the world, saying more nations should get nuclear weapons. Donald Trump as Commander-in-Chief scares me to death. And that's why we got to elect Hillary. So, now look, today starts the closing stretch of the campaign with the debate tonight. I'm real interested in this debate. I mean, I'm going to be on the very edge of my seat taking notes because I got to prep for debate next week. So I'm going to be doing, while most of you guys are, applauding or yelling, I'm going to be like taking notes and doing homework tonight. It's a high stakes night, but I tell you, Hillary is going to do very well because she's going to just lay out. She's going to lay out the vision, this positive vision for our country, and she's going to talk about plans. The thing about 90 minutes is, well, you can't hide. Now, Donald Trump likes to say, I'm going to build this wall, but then I'm not taking any questions about it. Okay, well, you got 90 minutes, and there's just a moderator and two of you on stage. You can run, but you can't hide. And so we're going to see tonight about Donald Trump. Can he give any details about anything he's going to do? Can he answer questions like, where's your tax return? Now get this. When Donald Trump was interviewed in 2014, hey, you're thinking about running for president, what are you going to do? Well, I haven't decided yet. But if I run for president, I am definitely going to release my tax returns. This was the first promise of the campaign. I'm definitely going to release my tax returns. And he's breaking the precedent that everybody since Richard Nixon has followed. Man, if you can't be as ethical as Richard Nixon goes, I mean, come on. And the thing about it, his tax returns would probably show that he doesn't pay a lot of taxes. And in which case, when he stands up and says, I'm going to be great for veterans, I'm going to be great for the military, well, who do you think is supporting veterans in the military? Is working people like us who are paying taxes. We may not love it, but we know if you support veterans, there's a responsibility to pay some taxes. You support the military, there's a responsibility to pay some taxes. You support some teachers, there's a responsibility to pay some taxes. You can't spend your whole life hiring lawyers who evade paying taxes, and then suddenly they sit and say, boy, I'm going to be great for the vets. I've been sniffing them my whole life, but I'm going to be great for the vets now. And the other thing about this tax return deal, and this is the second point, we're going to see if he has details. We're going to see if he answers questions. The tax returns might show these connections to Russia that are so strange. The tax returns might show that despite the claim that he's Mr. Charity, that he's actually not charitable at all. In fact, recently we found out that his charitable foundation spent $20,000 to buy a portrait of himself, spent $25,000 to give an illegal campaign contribution to your Attorney General, who was investigating Trump University. Now, that's not a charity to my way of thinking. But the other thing about the tax return issue that's really important is just think about it this way. This is a job interview. You have some questions. You have a right to get some answers. One of the questions that's just been a perennial is the voters want to know, I want to see your tax return to know, do you pay your taxes or do you stiff people? Are you generous or aren't you? Do you have weird connections or conflicts of interest or don't you? This is a basic job interview question. If you were interviewing somebody for a summer job and you said, hey, have you ever worked before? Can I have some references? No, don't think I'll give it to you. Let's see. Okay, so you're a student, so can you tell me about your grades and show me? No, don't think I'm going to give it to you. You wouldn't hire somebody for a summer job who wouldn't answer a basic question. This is a basic question. Donald Trump thinks he can get this over on you. He thinks he can blow it by you. He thinks, well, maybe the voters won't pay attention to this. He has a low opinion of voters. We are not gullible people. We are not going to be tricked by Donald Trump. He's got to answer the questions today. He's got to answer them. And then the last thing that we get to see about Donald Trump is whether he can tell the truth. But PolitiFact, I think you guys know, I think PolitiFact actually started here in Florida. It was a paper, it was a Tampa paper, wasn't it, or St. Pete, that started it, and now it's a national thing, calling elected officials candidates on what they're saying. And what they found is they have these categories, true, mostly true, somewhat false, completely false, pants on fire. More than 70% of the things that they check about Donald Trump are either completely false or pants on fire. They've never had a candidate like this before. I mean, a guy who would persist in the bigoted lie that President Obama wasn't born in, he'll lie about anything. Well, tonight, 90 minutes on stage, there's going to be a great opportunity for the American public to see if this guy can tell the truth. I mean, or maybe if he recognizes the truth. I mean, that's going to be a really important thing, and I think it's going to go well. Listen, you guys have been good to be with me. I'll just conclude. Want to tell you, this is close, and we really need you. It's close. Now, it's really close. It's really, really close. Now, this is like every race I've ever run. I told you I'm 8-0 in elections, but man, I don't win by much. I do not win by much. I always tell my friends, I'm not asking you to invest in a landslide. No, just invest and I'll just barely win, And I don't win by a lot because Virginia's a tough state. It's not the bluest state in the bunch. It's really battleground. It was super red up until 2008. So this is a close race, and I always thought it was going to be close. I encouraged Hillary Clinton in April of 2014 to run, about 10 months or so before she did. And she thanked me, and I said, just remember this, please. Remember this, please. I don't care what a poll says. I don't care what a newspaper says. You're the underdog until they call you the winner. Because you're trying to do something that's never been done. And if it would have been easy, somebody would have done it. You're the underdog until they call you the winner. And that's the attitude that I always put in my head before races, to try to power me forward, even if the polls are challenged, even if it's close, even if Virginia's a red state, I'm the underdog, until they call me the winner. And that's the attitude that we have to have going into this closing stretch so we can do our best work. And Florida is one of the 2 or 3, if not the most critical, most closely watched, could be the most razor thin. I mean, you will forever be connected in American history with the closest presidential race ever, with Florida being the decider in the closest and most controversial, in many ways, presidential race ever. If anybody ever says my vote doesn't matter, I say, can I tell you about Florida in 2000? I mean, can I tell you about Florida in 2000? So we have to have that attitude where the underdog totally calls the winner. And what I tell people about this is, that's a good attitude to have, not just for campaign's sake. It's a good attitude to have kind of about life. I was a chairman of the party, the Democratic National Party. I used to travel around a lot. And Democrats are all kinds of, we have labor and students, environmentalists, women's rights activists, New Americans. We got all kinds of groups. And we have the super progressives and the kind of blue dog Democrats who are more moderate to conservative. So we have a big spectrum ideologically too. But there are a couple of things that do unify us. And one of the things that I came to believe as I traveled around the country, and I went into meetings big and small everywhere, including Florida, is that Democrats were kind of underdog people. So when I said, my discipline wins, I'm the underdog, so the winner, something that kind of unifies us is I think we've got the rooting for the underdog gene. Maybe there'll be research one day and it will be determined that's actually part of our DNA. But the Democrats, we all kind of are underdog people. In my church, we would kind of say they're good Samaritan. You know the story. So this is from my tradition, and everybody has their different traditions. But it's a story that's meaningful, I think, regardless of what tradition you come from. So somebody's beaten up and lying on the side of the road, and a lot of people are just passing by and doing nothing, including important people, including leaders who should know better. And some are even passing by pretending not to notice. This is like one of the greatest stories ever. And then somebody passes by who actually, as a Samaritan, is kind of a little bit of an oppressed minority. When the story was being told, the Samaritan would have immediately given everything up. That's not like a high-minded person. That's not a leader. But goes over to help out. And as I was around the country, and as I see Democrats and Hillary Clinton as this kind of person, we're kind of underdog people. We're not the ones that walk by. That's just not who we are. We may not have all the answers. We may not know exactly what to do all the time. We may not know exactly what to say all the time. But if we're out there and we see somebody who needs a hand, we're kind of the people that want to just roll up our sleeves and do what we can and figure it out as we go. And so it's not hard to have that attitude of we're the underdog till they call us the winner, because we are trying to do something that hasn't been done. We are trying to make history. We are trying to battle for underdogs everywhere. And if we have that attitude, that's a way of kind of having the right motive to carry this thing home, being in the right emotional and kind of heart space to carry this thing home. And I know you could do it. I've watched Florida do its best work in these elections in 2008 and 2005. We're not asking anybody to do something they don't know how to do. You know how to do this. When the chips are down, you deliver. When the chips are down, you take care of business. And so let's just have that underdog mentality. If you have not volunteered yet and you want to, just text together to 47246. If you haven't registered and you want to, just go to iwillvote.com. You have till October 11 to register here in Florida. Early voting in Polk County starts on October 24th. We got a lot of work to do 6 weeks from tomorrow. It's intense, but nothing important is easy. Nothing worth doing is easy. And let's just do what we know how to do, and we will make history. We will make history, not somebody else. We will make history on the 8th of November by electing the first woman president, a wonderful public servant who's passionate about helping others, and then we go to work really making history by moving America closer and closer to our stronger together goal. Thanks so much. Lakeland, thanks so much. Go down the board. It's great to be with you. Let's go win this race.